Okay, so today, April 6th, we're covering all of the recent changes, all of the recent news, and just some quick updates on the PPP program, the EIDL, and some of the other relief options. So it is Monday, it's almost 11 a.m. Eastern, and 10% of the PPP is already allocated. I just watched Mr. Kudlow get on MSNBC Squawk Box or something, and he said that 38, I think it's something like $38 billion has already been assigned, and it's only been a day and a half. And what's interesting about that is there's only 35, basically 350 billion forgivable loans for PPP, which means that the funds are being depleted pretty quickly. If 10% of it's gone in a business day and 3 hours, then I'm going to start thinking, you know what, how long is this actually going to last? They have said already, and that I guess the president has already committed that if this runs out, they're going to go and try to ask Congress for more funds. But you know how dysfunctional they are, and they can't do anything between Congress, the Senate, and the president. So I wouldn't hold my breath on this. I know that there is a stimulus 4 bill that's supposed to be being released, and that'll probably include provisions to increase this. But as of right now, 10% of all these forgivable loans are already allocated, okay? So I'm going to quickly go over some of the different options you have, but in this video, I'm really going to focus on the PPP and the EIDL. So for most people, if you made over $75,000 in 2018, there's not much you have to do. You're going to get a stimulus check. It's $1,200 per adult and $500 per child. And they're basically going to go off of your 2018 tax return, which is kind of weird because you might have been making $300,000 in 2018. And if your income changed in 2020, you probably still need this money. Really stupid of them to do it like that. I guess the other thing they're also doing is they're basically going to refund this directly to your checking account that you have with the IRS. So if you've been paying or if you've been refunded money in the past, you should get direct deposit. For other people, you'll probably just get a check in the mail, and that could take a really long time. So one of the fastest things you can do is just go file your 2019 taxes and update everything. The other one is unemployment. This one has had a lot of headaches as well. This really depends on your state. So there's some states that are, have ancient websites like Florida and are really out of date and terrible. So you're going to face a lot of challenges with this. But basically what this does is the federal government will provide $600 a week for up to 13 weeks, and it extends state unemployment to 39 weeks. So potentially you can be getting $24,000 over 4 months for not working. So most people qualify under this as long as you've been impacted in any way. Your kids stay home from school, you can't go and do photo shoots. There's tons of different ways to get unemployment, and it expands this and it lets sole proprietors, the self-employed, independent contractors, freelancers tap into this. Even if your state doesn't allow it, the federal government will allow that for the $600. Okay, so really quickly, we got those two out of the park. But where it gets really interesting is the PPP, which this one was basically opened and available April 3rd. So most people have done this one, which is the $10,000 advance. And if you go into the SBA.gov website, they have a new page that kind of breaks this down, and it gives you different funding options. Most people don't want loans. So, you might not want this. If you absolutely need it, you can get a loan that has, deferred payments, et cetera, but this is not going to be forgiven. And then, maybe SBA debt relief. There's also provision, which I'm going to have to read a lot more into it, but basically for 2020 taxes, there's going to be a tax credit for keeping on employees for payroll costs. I don't know how that works in regards to the PPP and the EIDL. I'm going to say that as of right now, it's a pretty big, hefty tax credit. So that might come in handy. I'm not sure if it can be used with this, but that's just aside from all this coming from taxes. But there's a lot of confusion between these two, and I've tried to clarify it. But basically, just keep in mind that both of these are technically loans, okay? So this is a loan. This loan program provides loan forgiveness. So the PPP helps protect you and helps keep your employees on with payroll, helps you cover rent, helps you cover sick leave, helps you cover vacation and group insurance costs, etc. But remember, this is a loan. This is not automatically forgiven. You have to still apply for it to be forgiven. The second one is the EIDL loan. Now, this can also provide a $10,000 economic relief to businesses that are currently experiencing temporary difficulties. This is up to a couple of days ago. This actually said in 3 days, but I'm pretty sure they got bombarded. I applied on Monday. I haven't seen it, so I wouldn't hold your breath. When I talked to the SBA guy, if you guys have seen my wall, he basically said it's 3 days after it gets approved. So that could take up to 3 weeks plus the 3 days. And again, anything over the $10,000 does have to be repaid unless you refinance it. But that's where I'm kind of changing my position. Last week, my position was it might be faster to just get this and then refinance it. But the problem is that the funds are kind of running low, right? If literally within a day and a half, 10% has already been allocated, I don't think this money is going to last. The amount that's already been passed by Congress, I don't think this amount is going to last past this month. So it'd be kind of almost foolish to take the EIDL thinking you can refinance it. And then you're at the mercy of, are they going to provide more funding for it, or are they going to pass another bill? So I would not take my chances on that. So I'm going to revise my opinion on it based on how much has already been allocated, which probably should have been able to predict, but hey, stuff changes. But this one was a quick one. Still, I think it is important to apply for this one because there is a $10,000 advance. It does not have to be paid back, and you can do that directly on the SBA website, and it's up to $10,000. Just keep in mind that this does cover sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed, and business owners. But it is very specific that, the amount is based on, basically your earnings previously. It's based on how much you were impacted. So, if you'd only claimed a couple $1,000s in income last year, and now you're trying to get this $10,000, you're probably not going to get that amount or anywhere near it. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So let's go to the difference between these two and why it's so important that you apply for this one right now. And this is changing my stance that I don't think this is going to last long enough for you to refinance. Last week, I showed you a letter that said, hey, even if you've got the EIDL loan, you can refinance it. But I'm going to suggest you apply for this one up front because it's kind of risky to take all this money out, not knowing if it's going to be forgiven. So I think it's best to do the Paycheck Protection Program. So just to recap, unemployment, we went over that. That goes through your state. The EIDL, again, it covers almost everybody watching this video. The problem is it's not forgivable. The only way you can get it forgiven, number one, is the first $10,000 are forgiven. Number two, you have to refinance it into the PPP program, okay? Let's keep going. Paycheck Protection Program. Now, this one's important because over here, when you come into the website, and let's just say you go to, how to actually apply to this. Let's actually go in here. It's really simple. This form only takes all of 10 minutes to fill out. I've already submitted this to a bunch of banks, but basically you're going to check one so you can see that you're eligible. And then you're going to take your average payroll, multiply it by 2.5 times net of advance. So what's going to happen is let's just pretend that you have a payroll, let's just say you have like 2 employees and it's you, and you have a payroll of like $10,000 or something, right? Because you're going to count your income, especially if you're an LLC or S Corp, whatever. So if you have $10,000 here, you're going to do 10,000 times 2.5, which makes you eligible for up to $25,000, right? And then you're going to write the number of employees. And as long as you keep those same number of employees, you're going to be able to get this money. Now, some of the confusion comes in here. It's like, well, what if you get the EIDL? Well, if you get that advance, right, which most people haven't. So you're not going to put the advance money in here. If you have not gotten it, you're not putting it in here. Okay, so you're going to leave it at 25,000. If it's 2 weeks from now and you've gotten the money and now you're applying for the first time, of course you're going to add it, but you're not going to claim money you haven't received. And then it's going to walk you through, hey, what the purpose of the loan is. It's going to walk you through all of this, and it's pretty simple. Just don't lie on the form. Don't commit perjury. Don't liable, whatever. Just don't lie on this form. And then you're going to go find a bank that's accepting these applications. And again, it's important because 10% of this money is already gone. And what can this money be used for and forgiven for? Group health, sick pay, leave, 401k match, wages, commission, tips, mortgage interest, or rent. So if you have a home studio, that's kind of iffy. I highly doubt you're going to be able to use that. If you bought a building, you're not able to use it for the entire mortgage, just the mortgage interest. if you are self-employed, you're probably only going to be able to use it for your own payroll, which might be pretty small. So just keep that in mind. If you have fewer employees, if you have, whatever, you're going to be able to get less from it. And that's really the purpose of it, right? The purpose of it is to help companies that have employees. So you have a studio with multiple employees, that's going to help. And you must use the money for qualified expenses. You must maintain similar levels of employment, or you're going to be basically docked. And this can be forgiven, but remember, you have to apply for forgiveness. You cannot just take out the loan and just forget about it. You are going to have to ask for it. Okay. And one really important thing when you're doing this is, I came across a couple websites. So there's a couple websites that are already accepting applications. So you can go through Cabbage. And this is basically a lender that it's almost like a lender matching program, I'm pretty sure, right? So what you're going to do is when you apply through here, it's going to give you a list of documentation, which I have noticed almost every single website has asked for this. So I've applied at like 6 different places. Obviously, I can only take it at one place. Most places are probably not even going to take up my application, but it's important that you have these documents ready. You're going to need, information like your business start date. You're going to need information like, all of your tax forms. You're going to need information like, 2019 payroll statements, obviously, because you're going to have to prove that that money is going to be used for payroll and that it's going to cover that. So it's really important that you start collecting this information because all these banks are going to ask you for this. Okay. And the other thing, so when you go through, here's a quick document that'll just kind of walk you through. I'm going to link this in the video as well. This is from treasury.gov. It's important that you're informed as well, and that you make sure that you're answering everything truthfully and you're using it for what it's going to be forgiven for, because the last thing you want to do is take $30,000 and then find out, hey, you used it for the wrong purposes. And it's your job to do due diligence to make sure that you're using it properly. And then there's a couple banks that are taking loans already. A lot of them are requiring you to actually be a customer. So you can see Chase, JP Morgan, is a little bit behind the curve. They've taken their form down, but Cabbage is taking them. As of Friday, Ameris Bank was taking applications. I think now they recently changed it, so they were taking them online. Another place that was taking them online, I think, was First Bank. Let's see, First Bank was taking them, and all you had to do was go email it in. And then right now, Navy Federal Credit Union is also taking them, but I'm 99% sure you also have to be a member for them. So just keep your eye out. A lot of banks right now, as far as today and tomorrow, are starting to accept these applications, and they're all asking for basically the same thing. You have to download this application, the one I just went over. And then you're also going to have to start providing a lot of the information that's being asked for. If you go to Ameris, if you go to Cabbage, you're going to have these documents anyway, so you might as well start collecting them. Anyways, yeah, that's the update for April 6th. I'll go through some of the questions now. So if you guys have any questions, again, if you guys can share this, if you guys can tag people that you think need this information. I know there's a lot. I've been releasing videos on this almost every single day, and almost every single day something changes. So just keep in mind, biggest reminder is 10% of all of these funds have already been allocated. So there's 349 billion available. There's already been like 38 billion claimed. So that's over 10%. That's more like, I don't know, 11%. So that's an update. And it's growing every single day, and that's been within 1.5 business days. Okay, so Jennifer says, I am sure you covered this before and I missed it, but can a single member LLC file for PPP if we take regular owner's draw? Yes, you can. So again, this is very specific on who's eligible. And if you fall under one of these entities, by the way, the worst that can happen is you get denied. So you should be applying regardless. Even if you're hair and makeup artist and you've been doing everything completely wrong and you're not really tied down, and you're not like perfectly, documenting everything. I don't know. It's a toss up, but I would at least apply and just find out and see, who it applies to. But when you go in here, it literally tells you like who can apply. It's pretty broad, right? So it's like sole proprietorships, independent contractors, self-employed persons, non-for-profits, veteran organizations. So a lot of people do fall under this in the Paycheck Protection Program. So I do think you're good, and I think everybody should apply as long as you have a business, you have some income, you've actually been affected. What I don't think this is, it's going to be kind of a waste of time if, this is a hobby for you and you already have a full-time job and you kind of claimed a bunch of losses last year. It's going to be really hard for you to claim any payroll. And the bank's probably going to look at you and be like, yeah, we'll try to get you something, but probably not much is probably going to come from it. But hey, what's the worst that can happen? Okay. Amanda says, thank you. Yeah, no problem. Hola, Ashley. I've applied with a few lenders. Have you heard back from any of them? I've only heard back from my personal bank. Nope, I have not heard back from any of them. The one I am probably going to go with is Navy Federal. Yeah, just because I use them. They're kind of like a military bank. And yeah, I don't know. Hopefully they'll just be like the most understanding. And I think they really treat military members, even active or former, pretty good. So, between Chase and them, that's who I would want to go to. I just put it in with a bunch of different places just to make sure I could be at least one of the first few applicants to get this. I think if you get everything in by today or tomorrow, you should be good and be able to, get relief as long as you take action this week or early this week. Otherwise, I think you're going to be hoping and praying that another bill is passed because all the money is going to be allocated. Okay. Mark Andrew, I literally just applied for the EIDL this morning. Yep. What's the worst that can happen? 349 billion. I actually do think that's quite a bit. That is quite a bit of money. Again, there are numbers like, hey, there's 1 million businesses in the US. Like, sure, but a lot of them are not profitable. A lot of them don't have employees. A lot of them don't have the documentation properly. Every time I submitted my stuff, I submitted 200 pages of picture perfect, accounting. And, yeah, I'd find it really hard that if you're a viable business and you actually need help and you do this early, that you're not going to get in. A lot of the businesses around the US, they're just not as organized. They don't have employees. So, hey, is that bad for them? Yeah. But yeah. Okay. Robbie says, has anyone gotten the advance? I don't think anyone's gotten the advance yet. Again, it used to say 3 days on this thing. This thing used to say within 3 days. Now it just says at some time. So funds will be available following a successful application. So it used to say within 3 days. What I heard when I spoke to the guy on the phone, he said that a successful application could take up to 3 weeks or longer. And then he said 3 days after that. So it's almost like it was worded wrong before. And I assume, that was almost too good to be true, right? Like 3 days you would just apply and you would have money. That's kind of weird. For those who are so proper with no employees, is payroll just what you normally pay yourself? Yeah, basically. Okay. And again, that's almost the problem, right? Because, if everyone has all these fancy pants accountants and you're claiming that you make no money because you don't want to pay taxes. So last year, your payroll was all of, $600 a month. It doesn't leave you much to actually apply for, right? It's like $1,800, $1,500 and possible PPP. Okay. If anyone is on Wells Fargo, they're only accepting interested inquiries over the weekend, not even the application. Yeah, most banks, what I have seen and what I have seen online is that most big banks have not been ready to take applications. And it kind of makes sense, right? If you have, I don't know, if you have something like, 400,000 employees and you have like a huge webmaster team and everything's super organized structurally because things are being spread out across a big organization, it's probably really hard to make changes, right? But when you have a small credit union with like, 60 employees and you guys can make changes to your website within like a day or two, and you guys can all, even if the system's not perfect, you can make a decision, go with it, and then just start taking applications. And a lot of it's manual. Small credit, personal, family, credit unions, banks, local banks have been much better at rolling this out, where like the big guys like Wells Fargo, Chase, SunTrust, all of those have been super slow. But I also think like the inertia, it's way harder to change an entire bank with hundreds of thousands of employees processes than it is to change like a smaller bank. So you've been banking with a small bank, you've probably had a lot of luck, and this might, provide some just like a different perspective that, hey, it might be worth having in the future a relationship with a small bank, not just a major bank. A small local bank that is kind of flexible. They know your name, they know your kids, instead of just banking with like, not that there's anything wrong with the big banks, right? Like the big banks are probably more likely to survive during a downturn, but just having those options available, obviously in hindsight seems pretty obvious, but yeah, who would have known? Yeah, by the way, this is only available for US. So even in the PPP, your employees have to live in the US. So if you have American employees living in Mexico, this does not apply to them technically. So just keep that in mind. Okay, I'm not sure how to take advantage of this or any other programs. Haven't been able to pay myself consistently. Yeah, and honestly, you have to submit so much documentation that, let's just say I go through this and I go through PPP, click here, and I go through, they had some, let me see, cancel. They had a form up here, Ameris did, and Cabbage has this here. Like, you're going to have to submit a lot of documentation to get this, and it's based off of your previous earnings. So if you haven't been paying yourself and you've been claiming losses, you're not really going to be able to apply for much, if anything. They were super strict. All the applications I've seen have been like, how much is your payroll? How many employees do you have? How much did you guys spend on healthcare? How much did you spend on this? So just keep that in mind. That is one of the caveats, is this is specifically meant for companies with payroll. So, even if you are a sole proprietor and you try, you're probably just not going to get as much as a bigger company would with more employees. I thought you were not allowed. Hey, I know you cannot take, right? Like, you cannot take the loan more than once for the same purposes. But obviously, if you send an email on to a bank and they're going to take 6 weeks to get to it, as long as you're not signing on the dotted line, you haven't taken anything, right? It's kind of like, it's almost like, taking student loans out or taking a mortgage out in your house. Obviously, you can't take the mortgage physically out and accept the loan and have 2 mortgages and then apply for 16 mortgages. But you could apply, and then whoever's the first one, first come, first serve, that accepts you, you can do business with them. So I think it's like, it's nuanced in like the wording, right? You can only take the loan out once, especially for the PPP, but that doesn't mean you can't apply to work with different banks, especially considering some banks are, even if you submitted your stuff, they might not even get to your stuff for weeks. Some banks might not get to it ever. So really a toss up. So I think as long as you don't accept multiple loans, then you won't be breaking any laws. Okay, do you know if former military dependents, I don't know if former military dependents can get Navy Fed. That's kind of a hard one. I think that you need a business account. When I went through, I just applied for this. It is pretty wide who can get this. You basically just like need to know someone. So like if you come in and you like go to who's eligible, let's just say like, let's go to membership. Am I eligible? There's a huge list. I'm 99% sure that being married previously to somebody probably doesn't count. So DoD employees, DoD civilians, dependents. Hey, you can always try, but that might be a stretch there. But if you have somebody like in your extended family, spouse, grandparents, grandchildren, somebody in your household, like if you have somebody now that was in the military, was active, was a veteran, then you would be able to get there. But you can always try. I mean, with no harm in asking. My local bank said if you apply to another bank, they won't take your application. Yeah, how would they know? My dad is former active duty. And by the way, Remy, I agree with that sentiment, right? Because for them, imagine someone like me, and by the way, that's almost like scare tactics. Imagine they have so many limited resources that they're like, hey, if you tell us you applied with somebody else, we're not going to help you. Well, number one, I'm not going to tell you. And number two, I get that because then they know that they're going to be competing with other people with the speed and, of their service. So it's like a 30% chance you accept their PPP compared to somebody else who just comes in and says, yeah, I'm only doing it with you. Sure. Why want to concentrate on that person because they know that person, if they do all the paperwork, they're going to go with them. So yeah, it sounds almost like a scare tactic. Is it ethical? Sure, I guess. But at the end of the day, our interest is more important than the bank's interest or the bank teller's interest, whether they feel like they're going to be wasting their time. And again, how else would they know, right? Because the first person that goes through and puts all this paperwork together, right? Because they're not submitting the application first. First, they're looking through your application and they're going to look and say, okay, are you even eligible? Does this even seem like it's worth our while, or do you fall within the parameters? So even then, it's just like a preliminary application. It's not like you haven't really applied yet. It's not until you submit all the paperwork, then they still have to go check all the paperwork, and then they submit it, right? Or then they approve it, right, according to the guidelines of whatever the case is. So it's not really like there's like a central place where like they just get your application and then they're just sending it off to the nether sphere, to like a central hub. It's not really working that way. So it really wouldn't matter if you apply other places. My dad is former active duty. Yeah, that would probably fall under you. So I would contact Navy Fed. So yeah, family members. Yeah, so as long as your parents weren't, you can definitely apply. Okay, I use Navy Fed. I'm pretty sure you can still, if he has. Yeah, I think. I think Mark, what she was asking, like if she was married to somebody and then she was a military dependent then, but then she got divorced. That like doesn't make you a dependent anymore. So it's not like you still have veteran status from that. That's something. Yeah, but whatever. Chase Online took my PPP application last night. Yeah, so Chase was up, and this is what has come of it. So I'm pretty sure that something happened. Maybe like their system was like half broken or whatever. Maybe it was slow or they were missing information or something like that. But they've since taken it down and they're making upgrades to it. So hopefully everyone who applied is still good. But I'm pretty sure something like that happened. Okay. I'm a sole proprietorship. Do I count myself as one employee and write that in the form? Not sure how to allocate how much I'm being paid as an employer. Yeah, I'm going to stop where I am. I am a random guy on the internet that just reads this stuff. So you need to either contact the bank, you need to go look through things. If it was my guess, what you would do, your payroll, if I was a sole proprietor, my guess would be you would go through all of last year and you would say, okay, what was my earned income from, whatever tax form? You can even ask your accountant or go look at your taxes for 2019. And if you saw, okay, I made $25,000 or profit, then you might say, okay, that is my payroll for last year. Every month that accounts for $2,000 a month, and I am one employee. So that's at the simplest. That's what I would assume. It seems the most correct, but talk to your accountant. Talk to somebody or talk to the bank. I don't know. By the way, you can also call the SBA. That is one thing you can do. If you have any questions, contact the SBA. They actually answered for me within like 10 minutes. So they have free resources. They help. And that seems the most correct, but yeah. But the PPP still covers rent, utilities, so you should be able to cover rent costs under PPP. Yes, and that is a very interesting part to it, right? Because what happens is my understanding for what amount can be approved is, even if your payroll, let's just say your payroll is whatever, you claim a lot of expenses and last year you made $2,000 per month, right? Well, yeah, you might have a lot of expenses, $2,000 per month, and maybe your rent is $4,000. Maybe your utilities and all the other stuff adds up to $1,000, right? Well, the equation the equation for the amount that you can get is not all of this combined. It's only your payroll. So it's only gonna be times 2.5, right? So it's gonna be $2,000 per month times 2.5, which will give you $5,000, right? So that just means that that's the amount you're allotted to. And if you use that amount for payroll, rent, utilities, it can be forgiven. But your rent is not part of the maximum amount you can draw out. So you actually might fall short, right? So if somebody does have, that's kind of where that 0.5 comes. You're getting like an extra you get 2 months of payroll and then basically half of your payroll to cover all these other stuff. It doesn't just because your rent was $10,000 does not improve this at all. The only number it technically goes off of is your payroll. So yeah, you can technically use it for that, but just keep that in mind. It's the equation, and the form itself does not say, hey, multiply your monthly payroll plus your rent plus your mortgage interest plus your utilities. No, it is only this. And whatever the final amount after the 2.5 times, that can be used towards that stuff. But having a bigger rent does not help get you more forgiveness or a bigger amount. Okay, you need a relative to have NFCU to get it. Yep. All right, guys. Hopefully this helped. I know there's still a lot of questions for this. Worst case scenario, you can apply. It's not going to kill you to apply, because remember, a banker is going to look through this. It's just a preliminary form, right? And they're going to look through this, and they're going to take you up on it and prioritize you, right? So if you're in doubt, if you're just one employee, your payroll is really low, still submit it, not a big deal. But just know that your numbers are going to have to match, because you're going to have to provide a lot of this information. So just keep that in mind. And the eligibility is based on your ability to pay back, having good credit, and then probably also within the bank, how much you're actually withdrawing, right? So just keep that in mind. So hopefully that helps. Again, if you guys find this useful, please share it. Please tag someone in it. I have changed one thing, which was I did note that before you could technically get the EIDL refinanced and turned into PPP, but I'm kind of changing my position on that, because 10% of it is already being, or 11% of it's already being used up within the first 1.5 business days. That leads me to believe that if you take the EIDL and you try to refinance it in a month, it might already be gone. So just keep that in mind, and you do not want to be at the mercy of not knowing, whether you can actually get it forgiven or not. So safest bet is apply for the advance. Hopefully you get some of the EIDL advance, and then apply for PPP. So hopefully you guys find some banks, and I will see you guys in the next one. I don't know how to log out of this thing. Later.